Do you ever wonder why you're doing what you do in life? Do you wish that you could be really happy and passionate about what you do? Or maybe you already are and you want to expand in a different direction. Hi, I'm Barbara Ann, host of What the Why? I love what I do. A lot of that has to do with my story, my journey to this point in life. And guess what? Everybody has a story. So please join me for conversations with leaders from all walks of life about what they do, and more importantly, why they do it, how they found their core purpose, their passion, their mission in life. And if you're looking for your own, maybe you'll get some great suggestions on how you too can find your why. Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of What the Why. And for those of you who are joining us on Apple as well as iHeartRadio, welcome to the show. If you haven't seen us before, no matter where you're joining us, our show features conversations with extraordinary, incredible people, leaders from all walks of life, about why they do what they do and how they figured out this is their thing, their purpose. Maybe you're sick and tired of feeling sick and tired, or you feel stuck and you want to get unstuck, whether that's in your life, your career, or your own company. All of our guests have had something in common with you. At some point, they felt somewhat similarly and they decided to do something about it, or they went through some kind of a massive pivot. And they all have amazing stories, and today's guest is no exception. I'm really excited to introduce you to Nick Elliott, also known as the Wine Guy. He's a certified sommelier, which is a word it took me forever to learn how to pronounce. He's a classically trained chef and a former winemaker with over 30 years of hospitality experience. Championing his signature ground to glass philosophy, Nick bridges the gap between the source of our food and wine, the literal dirt and culture and people, and the final moment of truth when it reaches your table or your glass or your mouth. His expertise wasn't just built in a classroom, it was forged in the field, complete with the purple stained hands of grape harvest, the raw cuts of a professional kitchen. And as a dynamic educator, emphasis on the word dynamic, curator of immersive international travel, and host of the Pour and Explore podcast, Nick is on a mission to dismantle the snobbery, let's face it, there is some, of the hospitality world. He empowers his clients and listeners to drink what they like, get their boots in the dirt, and transform from being mere customers into welcome guests wherever they go. I'm so excited to have him here, and we're going to be talking about everything from how he came to this point in his life to the tours that he offers, which sound really exciting. So, fresh off of a week-long birthday celebration, please join me in a round of applause and welcoming Nick the Wine Guy. So, yay! So, welcome, welcome, welcome.
Thank you so much, Barbara. I really, really appreciate it.
So, as everybody knows, including you, and for those of you who are joining us for the first time, we ask all of our guests the same first question when we read their amazing bio. Nick knows what that is because I don't know that maybe Nick was thinking about wine when he was little, but I know I wasn't. So I'm always curious. Nick, what did you want to be when you were little and thinking about what you wanted to do?
So I always knew that I wanted to be in the food world. The family that I grew up in Philadelphia, in the city of Philadelphia. My parents were, both working parents. I was a latchkey kid, back in the 70s and the 80s, and I was one of the people who contributed to the cooking for the house, even at a very young age. And I really, really enjoyed it. So I always knew I wanted to do something with food. As I started going through high school, I worked in a few kitchens, doing dishwashing, things like that. I finally got the opportunity to work actually in the kitchen at a hospital on the food line, and that was so much fun. I really, really loved it. And I decided that after high school, I was going to join the Navy and I was going to work on a ship cooking. That was my goal. I didn't know how it worked or anything like that, so I went to the Navy recruiter's office and let them know what I wanted to do, and they sadly said, unfortunately, because of some physical things that are going on with you, you are not Navy material, if you will. So I went elsewhere and jumped directly into the food industry and have been working with food and drink for the last 35 years.
Now, I can understand the cooking, but a certified sommelier, that's a interesting path, as I understand it. You have to have a very sensitive palate
Mhm.
too. So, what took you from, okay, I want to cook in the military to becoming this wine connoisseur and expert educator around it?
Sure. The sommelier certification didn't come until quite later in my journey. So when I was still on the East Coast in the Philadelphia area for many years. I did a couple of different things. I got out of restaurants. I did a couple of other things in the hospitality and the entertainment business. That's where I met my wife, and my wife was basically moving from Pennsylvania, where she was going to school, to California. We got very close, and the conversation was basically, if you want to be together, you have to move to California with me. So that's what we did. We hopped in a car. We drove to Alabama, where she's from originally. We got married in her parents' backyard, and drove the rest of the way across country and pulled into California in October of 2004.
Wow.
Yeah, and so that was quite a fun journey. And shortly thereafter, her father bought at the time it was a 400-acre ranch in California, not too far from where we were living, and he wanted to create a hospitality ranch, so weddings and hotel, restaurant, and on top of that, plant a bunch of vineyards and make wine
Wow.
on the property. So he asked us to come work for him because of our hospitality backgrounds, and we ran the ranch. My wife and I ran the ranch for 15 years and built the hotel program, built the restaurant program, built the wine sales program. I was lucky enough to be able to be there from the literal planting of the grapevines to the cultivation of the grapevines and the care of the vines to when they started bearing fruit, harvesting the grapes, and we're also in the process of building a winery all at the same time. Which was a fun education in and of itself. A lot of engineering that goes along with that, which was nowhere near my specialty. And so I got into the winemaking side of the thing. And that is, as you can imagine, a lot of hard work. It's a lot of back-breaking work, lifting tons of grapes and shoveling and pressing and cleaning, and you're on your knees and you're up and down and so on. So for me, I wanted to take the education that I've already gotten and put it to more use in the restaurant side of things. So I stopped making the wine for a while, and I started educating myself as a sommelier. So I actually didn't get my SOM certification until 2017.
Wow, that was
Yeah.
quite a journey, but an impressive one. And kudos to you for doing that. And part of what I love about what you're talking about is when you talk about being in the dirt, as you just described, you were in the dirt.
Oh,
You're
absolutely,
like right
100%.
out there. And
Yes.
that's work that you have to do because you're passionate about.
hmm
Um, where do you think that passion ultimately comes from?
Well, for me, it's I have a very how personality, which means that I love to know how things work. And if I come across something not only that I'm interested in, but also being fascinated by how it works, I want to know more about it, and I tend to dive right in, you know. In my business nowadays, I don't have to do a lot of how work as far as continuing education and all of that stuff because I know now how it all works. So I find outlets for myself. Every time a new AI program, is launched, I go and I need to know how that works. Or a new software, pops up. I want to know how that works. So I dive in fully. So I've found an outlet for my need to know more in other things.
I love it because what I'm hearing you say is you're a forever learner. And
Yes.
this was part of an important part of your journey, and you continue to learn, evolve, and innovate, which is something I'm sure that you then apply to what you are doing, hence
Oh,
some
of
of the
course.
other
Yes.
stuff, whether it's podcasting or your tours, etc. What types? Let's talk about the actual wine because there's lots
Sure.
of different types. And I admit, like, I have a couple go-tos. I'm
hmm
not the most familiar. My bestie, who may very well have visited, I didn't get a chance to hear back from her, but so much of what you're describing really does sound like where she went. Um, and she's a big wine connoisseur, so
hmm
I usually just tell her, just get me something sweet. I don't even know. Um, but let's talk about the different types that you offer directly from your location, as well as some of the others that you tend to agree. Like most people think, okay, white is chicken and red is beef, but it's so much more involved than that.
It definitely is. So I'll start off by saying I am no longer, I should say, a wine salesman. I don't do that anymore. I don't have a wine inventory that, I sell to people, things like that. I did do that for a long time, but that's not part of my services any longer. Um, to give you an example, I mentioned before we started filming today that I did the wine tasting this weekend. It was a group of family, anywhere from 13 to 45, maybe a little bit more, and so there were about 15, 16 drinkers, and the customer hired me to come and do a fun and interesting wine seminar, if you will, for the family, and it was all very casual. So I helped him pick out 6 bottles of wine based on their likes, wines that I'm familiar with as well. And he went to Total Wine here in California. He bought the wines, brought them in, and basically I talked through the 2 hours that I was there about each wine, educated everyone on how the wine is made, where it's made, even down to the soils that it's grown in, and things like that. And it's all about um, increasing their enjoyment through understanding of the wine, and gaining more of an appreciation to wine of wine. So we had wines from the States, we had wines from France, we had wines from Italy, we had wine from Australia and Uruguay, Spain, so I really wanted to give them a very international flavor, of the wine world. Um, Traditions are different and things like that. So, and then to answer your original question, yes, there are so many wines out there, and I can't be an expert on all of them, but I try to be on as many as I possibly can. I took a group to Germany last year, and we were in Germany for 11 days. So the time that I spent the year before that trip to Germany rather, I said to myself, "You are going to become a German wine expert in the next year." And that's what I did. I sat down and I read every book that I could possibly find on German wine. I read every possible website that I could on German wine. So by the time I got to Germany with my group, I wasn't speaking German, but I understood all of the nuances about German wine and their production and things like that, and then was able to then imbue that knowledge onto the group that I took with me.
And
So
that
these are
one of
some
the
of the
things I
things we
love
do.
about, yeah, one of the things I love about that is when I think of Germany, part German descent, I think Oktoberfest. I think
Hmm.
beer. And I love that you went on this exploration of German wine. Most people, when you think Europe, you think France, Italy, maybe Spain,
Hmm.
Germany.
Yeah,
So, what
absolutely.
prompted you to explore Germany in particular?
Well, Germany has not only some of the oldest wine production in Europe, but it's got some of the most rich and cultural winemaking
Yeah.
in that country as well. Um, the southern half of Germany is very, very well suited to growing grapes. And although it gets very cold in some of those places, they've actually adapted their grape growing to be able to last through the colder autumns and into the freezing winters that they have in that country. So it's really interesting, how they've taken, what the climate has given them, and as the climate changes, they are then having to readapt to that climate change as well. We can go into a little bit of that if you're interested in that, but yeah, they've created a niche for themselves in Germany where they're producing really, really world quality wines, and wines that are, and not that I'm relating quality to dollar figure by any means, because I don't like to do that because it's not always true. But four, five, $600 bottles of wine, that they're producing there, really super high quality, that you wouldn't necessarily think of a country like Germany. But they really make amazing, amazing wine.
And see, and had we not had this conversation, who knows when I would have learned that?
Hmm.
And so that's one of the things I love about having these types of conversations is the things you wouldn't otherwise know unless you're talking to somebody who's really truly passionate and an expert in this area. And which is also I want to kind of bring back around, what you had in your bio in terms of dismantling the snobbery of the hospitality world. Because we know I used to love watching the show Frasier and
Hmm.
others. Um, I think we are now entering a point when people are realizing, well, that can be me too. And
Hmm.
what I'm hearing is you help people on that journey, which is really important. Um, what prompted you to take that path? There's plenty of snobs out there.
Yeah.
And when you and your wife went into this first in the hospitality side, let's point out what you did was during a very difficult time in our
Hmm.
economy, and you still were
Absolutely.
successful.
Yes.
We're talking about some serious downturns in that 2008, 2009, 2010 timeframe, and here you were working towards your sommelier for 2017, while then also then pivoting out of direct production into these other specialties. You know, where did you find the courage to take these kinds of risks that others wouldn't have?
I think a lot of it is confidence,
Mhm.
confidence in myself, and then also confident that my family would back me up, if you will, and be supportive. Um, as you pointed out in 2008, we definitely had a huge economic downturn, especially here in California.
Yes.
But you know, some things were not affected too much. People were still getting married, so that helped us a lot as a wedding venue. Um, People weren't drinking as much wine, but at the same time, since we only started planting in like 2006, 2005, 2006, our wine production wasn't ready to be put out around that time anyway. So it really wasn't until about 2010, as we were coming out of that economic downturn, that our products were ready to be put on the shelf. And the timing was good because that's when people started buying things again.
Mhm.
All of the hard work and the backbreaking labor and all of that stuff that we talked about, that was happening throughout, definitely. And I wanted to try as many things in the industry as I possibly could, and again, I've got a family who supported me going through it, making these small little pivots here and there, or in a lot of cases, just add-ons. It was, we bought a restaurant, so that was an add-on to what, I was already doing. And I was the GM of that restaurant, and I was I handled the bar program at that restaurant in addition to all of my other duties, running the wine program and, also studying for my SOM and all of that stuff. So, there was a lot going on
Yeah.
during that 2014 to 2017 timeline.
Yeah. And you had your family, you and your wife were doing this. A lot of this as well. She was involved, actively involved as well.
Yes,
Yeah.
she was the CEO of the company. Yep.
Yeah. So, spouses working together is an ultimate test of love.
Yes, it is.
You're still together, so
Yes,
you pass,
we
clearly.
are. We are.
And so I want to kind of circle back around because Germany was an important trip, but it's not the only one.
Correct.
You do other curated tours. So let's talk about what that looks like, because I'm sure there's an audience that's listening and or watching this right now who would love to go, okay, where else can I go? First of all, they may not have never have thought about Germany too, unless they're very serious and educated wine connoisseurs. But what are some of the other places that you have and or will be conducting international tours?
Sure, absolutely. So last year, 2005 was a big year for me. I had a really great time. We went to France and sailed around the Bordeaux region, all along the rivers there, and went to some of the more, we saw Chateau Margaux, and we saw a lot of those big names. We went to Sauternes in France. We went to Cognac. in France. So we really got to see a lot of these beautiful old towns that have been, again, making wine for 5, 6, 700 years. It was really, really amazing to see those. So, you take a little group around and you stop for dinner and then you sail to the next city and that was really a lot of fun. One of my favorite things to do, and I probably did not say it out loud, is river boat excursions on the rivers in Europe. So that's what I specialize in. I do land tours, but riverboat tours is really my specialty. So we all gather on a really nice high-end riverboat, and then we sail from port to port to port to port, and we spend a day in this town, and we go off and we do excursions around wine and food, maybe a little museum or church here and there. But they're really meant to be food and wine cultural events. And they typically last anywhere from 7 to 12 days, just depending on the length of the sail, which is really nice. The one that I was mentioning just this past fall, that was 5 countries. It started in Switzerland. And we sailed all the way up through France, Germany, Luxembourg, went down the Mosel River. We were on the Danube. I'm sorry, the Rhine rather, the Rhine River that goes up, and then we went down the Mosel River in Germany, and that's where they produce amazing Riesling wines, which they're known for in that area. We sailed back out and then we sailed up into Amsterdam. So that was super fun. The food was amazing. The people were amazing. The wine was awesome. And we saw places, the one vineyard we went to in Germany had been producing wine for I think 800 years. And we
Wow.
were actually in the wine cellar that was dug 800 years ago. You
Wow.
know,
800 years.
yeah.
It's longer than our country's been around. I mean,
That's
as a
exactly
country.
right.
I mean,
Yeah.
that is incredible. Um, what was it like going down into this original basement?
Oh man, I've been to quite a few over the years, but this one got me just by the sheer vastness of it. It was probably the largest cave. It's like a man-made cave. I'm in there digging and 800 years and they're also using, their hands to put concrete on the wall and all of that stuff and the fact that it's survived, all of this time, through wars and just everyday wear and tear, things like that. It really got me as one of the most beautiful places, I've ever seen, and beauty in that its longevity was beautiful, if that makes sense.
It does make sense because what I'm imagining also is along with that history in terms of where they're making it is the history in terms of how they're probably still making it.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. These are typically always family businesses, especially in Europe, family businesses that have been passed down through the generations. Um, this was not this trip that I'm talking about, but I did another sailing through Eastern Europe back in 2024, where we saw Romania, Serbia, Hungary, Austria, Czech Republic, all of those great countries in, the old Eastern Bloc, of the USSR that are now all democratic and free, and they do amazing things with wine and food. But Austria, in the town of Vienna, we stopped and had dinner at a little restaurant and winery in Vienna, and we met the great, 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 great grandson of the gentleman who started the winery in the city of Vienna 600 years ago.
Wow.
Yeah, so the last name is Anderson, and they just a line of Andersons, have come down over 600 years. So I got to sit down with Mr. Anderson, who's actually quite young. He was probably only maybe 25 or 28 years old, but he runs his family business now.
That's phenomenal. And it's interesting because, of course, in my mind, there's probably people listening to this right now. They go, "You met the Andersons?" Of course, my mind goes to Hans Christian Andersen and Winnie the Pooh. But I mean, but for those who really know this, and it's something I really do want to know about, which is one of the many reasons why I was so excited to have you on. But that's incredible. It's like going to the Colosseum of wine.
Yes, absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely.
And the fact that it's still standing. I mean, we have a major building in Philadelphia that just came down, had to be imploded, and yet you have something that's been around for over 800 years that's still in active production, which is phenomenal.
Yeah, it really is mind-boggling. The way that the Europeans, and I'll go across the board, particularly the Italians, the way they preserve their history and preserve their monuments. I mean, they spend a lot of TLC and money, making sure that these things last,
Mhm.
for as long as they've have. I've been to Rome and I've seen, these monuments that were built 2,000 years ago, 2,500 years ago, that are still upright and well maintained and so on. So, they do a really good job, of that all throughout France well, through most of Western Europe, which was held by the Romans for so many times. You still have these beautiful Roman cities that still stand with the 20-foot Roman walls that are still around the town, and people still live that way, encircled by big stone walls. It's very interesting to see, and they keep them very well.
And for people who are all about making experiences, what, if any, plans do you have for your next tour?
So I am in active communication with one of my favorite travel agents. Her name is Chessine. She is out of the state of Hawaii, and she and I have been talking for a while about doing a tour in Portugal. So that is what we are pinning down right now. I'm pretty sure I've got a call with her next week to finalize some details. And that one's going to be interesting because we're working with a new company that we've not worked with yet. And we're actually going to be doing, we're looking at probably fall of 27 for the actual tour. But to help promote it, we're going to be doing a live cooking class online, a live cooking class online where it'll be myself and a chef, a Portuguese chef who actually lives in Portugal, doing the cooking, and then I will have wines that I will be pairing along with the foods that the chef is cooking. So we always have to find new and inventive ways of piquing people's interest. So that's something that we're going to do for this Portugal tour to gain some interest for this event.
So, for those of you who thought about going to Portugal and want to learn more about this, first of all, you want to make sure that you find Nick's podcast, Pour and Explore, because I imagine that will come up on that
It
as
will,
well as
absolutely.
follow him on all his socials that are going to be available in the content section below wherever you're accessing this audio or video. As part for parting thoughts, there's so many things you could have done along the way during the interesting economic challenges, and you forged
Mhm.
ahead. For those who are letting the fear of change still overwhelm them so that because they're just not quite ready to let go of that fear of staying the same because the unknown can be so scary. What advice do you have for them regarding finding their passions and doing what they're really fascinated or want to learn about?
Well, I would say that we have so much learning, education available to us nowadays through technology. That if you feel that you have an interest in this, that, or the other, whatever it might be, knitting or, glass blowing or whatever the case may be, if that interests you at all, I would highly recommend immersing yourself as much as you possibly can in that world through education channels like YouTube or school, things like that. And then that I believe is going to help you decide, is that for me? Is it not for me? And then Facebook groups are awesome. School communities are awesome. If the guests are not familiar with the platform School, it's SKOOL. It's a community-based learning program. So you can go there and have conversations with people who do those things, people who are interested in doing those things. So building yourself a little village, a little community of like-minded people, I think will very, very much help you bolster your enthusiasm for the thing that you want to do. I don't like really doing anything until I do a little research first. And then once I find that I was not going to get my sommelier certification, but I knew where my career was heading, because I couldn't do that laborious work anymore. I had to find a way to still make money, and but do it, from a desk, or do it from standing on stage for 30 minutes as opposed to, scooping grapes for 10 hours, things like that. So learn as much as you possibly can and find yourself a village that's going to support you.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Now, for those who thought that the 2024 and 2025 trips sounded amazing and might want to learn more about Portugal or follow Nick on his podcasts, access his site, learn more about the upcoming series that he's going to be doing with Portuguese chef. As I mentioned earlier, all of his contact information is being posted. But just for those who are listening audio or watching video, what's the ideal way to reach you?
Sure. Really, email is totally fine. You'll find that on my website, which is thewineguy.vin, V-I-N. So you'll be able to access my socials there. You'll be able to contact me via email there. And then you'll be able to find and also subscribe to my podcast through all of the major platforms on my website. So I would say that's a really good place to start. And then if you'd like to get a hold of me on TikTok or Instagram or Facebook, you can do that as well.
Awesome. So thank you, Nick, for joining us from California and for
Absolutely.
sharing your elements of your expertise and some of the exciting things that you have coming up. We really appreciate it. And for all of you who are joining us, we hope that was really interesting topic for you. Um, we feature so many amazing guests that do so many different things, and so many of them, like Nick, have found alternate ways to kind of stay with the thing that they know as their passion and just keep pivoting and evolving and learning and growing and pivoting and evolving and learning and growing. And so we really appreciate that you take the time to watch or listen to this show. And please, if you find interest in it, maybe somebody else you know will as well. Feel free to share that information with them. We love it when you do. And also, please remember, whether you're one of the many who watch us or listen to us who are looking to make changes in your life, no matter how big or small, please tune in again for more interesting, illuminating, and fascinating conversations with guests like Nick, who found a unique series of ways to find his purpose, pivot periodically, and live it.